I'll do my
Mr. Ferry,
preliminary.
we're live, and I will keep an eye on the attendee list.
Okay, thank you. Welcome everyone to the February 15th regular meeting of the Maritime Advisory Board of the City of Annapolis. As is my custom, I introduce those who are on your screen, and I will start with the Honorable Mayor Gavin Buckley, who is joining us this evening to discuss some important legislation. And then I typically just go around my screen in the order on my screen. So we have Frida Wildy, who is a member of the board. We have Peter Trogdon, who's a member of the board. We have Debbie Goslin, who's a member of the board. We have Mike Tomasini, who's a member of the board. We have Duncan Hood, who is a member of the board. And I'm not sure how we managed to get everybody in that order on the board. And then we have Mayor Buckley. Jake Iverson is a guest joining us. Jake is the new owner of Watermark and asked to join us this evening as a guest. And of course, it's a public meeting, so anyone is invited to join as a guest. Stephen Rice from the City of Annapolis. We have Beth Bellis, our Harbor Master. Alderman Ross Arnett from Ward 8. We have Madeline, who is keeps us all in order by City of Annapolis TV. Kimberly Consoli is our recorder, and Hillary Raftovich is the Boards and Commissions chair, who I think has been tasked with running the slideshow, if I'm not mistaken. So with that, typically we would go through the agenda in order out of deference to the fact that, and what I will do with any guests, but in particularly with the mayor, is to allow our guests who have a presentation to go first, so that they do not have to sit through the mundane rest of the meeting. So Mayor Buckley, I will turn it over to you at this point.
Well, I can sit through your meeting if you promise to sit through some of ours.
I have sat through some of them. I've sat through them. I have to confess, it is easier to sit through some of them remotely than it is to sit through them on those hard chairs in City Hall.
So first of all, I want to say thank you for what you all do. I truly appreciate what it means to have volunteers like yourselves in this city. We are a better city for you all. And so thank you for the time that you give. And I truly think the wheels would fall off the city if it wasn't for the amazing volunteerism. So thank you for what you do. I also like being on this one, particularly because you all live exotic lives and you're all over the country. And I like hearing about your adventures. So please send me some pictures. Well, thank you for letting me present on this. I told you, when I ran for office that it wasn't going to be boring, that we were going to continue to try new things. Annapolis is a city that, sometimes is reluctant to change. It's a great place. So in some cases, why would you change anything? I'm not afraid to try things and then say I was wrong. I'm not afraid to put an idea forward or to listen to someone else's idea. And, I often can change course because I love ideas, but I will always try new things. I truly believe we're at a moment in history in the country now and if any of you watched the Super Bowl, every second ad was about an electric vehicle. We know that when you can afford an ad at the Super Bowl, there must be something there, right? For so many car companies to be moving in that direction. Now, we are a beautiful city that obviously has automobiles, but we have many boats. And I have proposed an idea, and this is what I think, that when we start to move towards rebuilding the infrastructure of this country, which has clearly been a priority of the Biden administration, the municipalities or the cities that have a plan are the cities that will potentially get the funding for that. So we have a plan, and that plan was born out of the need to mobilize people when the Hillman garage is being rebuilt. We have a vendor whose title is the Annapolis Mobility mobility is in their title. And we have a lot of parking in the city of Annapolis. The challenge with the city of Annapolis is that for decades, we have conditioned people to think they can park on the water. And inevitably, when they can't park on the water on those busy weekends that we all experience, they back up the Eastport Bridge, they back up Gate 1 of the Naval Academy, and they circle around and they burn more fossil fuel than they need to. So we think the rebuilding of the Hillman Garage is a great opportunity for the city to recondition the public, to reposition where people park, and create transportation that is fun, that is free, and that is part of the experience when you come to Annapolis. I always talk about the San Francisco trolley because it's something that we do when we go to San Francisco. It's part of what you do when you go to a great city like that. You get on their public transport and you experience it. So we are proposing a transportation plan that has multiple components. The first one, and I'll go over them quickly because it doesn't relate to this board, but an enhancement of the circulator. We want to make the circulator 100% electric. We want to potentially extend the route of the circulator to touch on the stadium and also touch on the Growls supermarket, so that we can get people to, and we could just stop on that one. Hillary, can you go to the top one? And this is an example of what we would be, down one more, the first one, thank you. This is a Montreal sort of short bus, and it is a 100% electric. And we think we could do some version of this and the circulator, and that is what currently leaves from Park Place and takes people through the Arts District, then through the Historic District, and then to the waterfront. We think we can, we think we should make this 100% electric, and it would be a great way for us to test 100% electric mobility, because the short runs that you do from the stadium to City Dock mean that a bus could run a whole day on one charge and then come back to its base at the end of the day and charge overnight. We are pushing that. The second option in mobility, and Park Place is where the city employees are going to be moved to when we rebuild the Hillman Garage, and we hope that we can continue to locate most of the employees in that remote parking space and leave the valuable parking for the businesses and the visitors to the city. Within that, we are proposing a 10-minute trolley. This would operate from Calvert Street. If any of you know where Calvert Street is, it's close to Tsunami. It's where the People's Park is. It's where the county offices are. We plan on having a transportation hub there, charging stations there, and using Calvert Street, because Calvert Street is a place where there is a lot of parking. There is the Gotts Garage, there is the county garage, and then there is the state garage, which is free next to St. John's. It's free 7 nights a week, and it's free all weekend long. And we're proposing these 10-minute trolleys do small loops on secondary roads to move people around the city and get them to Main Street and get them downtown. We also potentially see this as an option for Eastport. We could have a 10-minute trolley that moves people from the peninsula, from 5th Street, out to the shopping center and out to where there are other parking assets that aren't utilized at nighttime and aren't utilized on the weekend. So we see that as a good way to move people around Eastport and keep traffic off the peninsula. I truly think that we need to head people off before they get onto the peninsula and crowd the peninsula and make it impossible to get off at certain times. Now that trolley would go to 5th Street, where you all come in. on Fifth Street, if any of you know, we have some pretty compromised conditions there. We have a street end that has not been upgraded in a long time, that floods, but also it rhymes with Ferry, Fifth Street Ferry. So we thought that was a good place to potentially propose a pilot of a small transportation idea that we could see how it works. Now, Fifth Street, the Fifth Street Ferry, and this one you're looking at currently, is a small version of a ferry. It can hold 8 bikes and maybe 11 or 12 people, and it would leave and just do one dedicated route. That dedicated route would be between Fifth Street and it would go to Prince George Street, which is the edge of the historic district. And then from Prince George Street, it would go back to Fifth Street. There are no current plans to expand that idea, but we truly believe if we can pilot this idea in the city of Annapolis, it will get people from a parking asset, which is the Annapolis parking facility right there, Carroll's Creek, and it will get people to the historic district, or it will bring people from the historic district across to Fifth Street to the shopping precinct of 4th Street, and also get them connected to other electrifications of transportation, whether that be the trolley that is waiting there to pick them up to take them out to the shopping center, or whether it's an electric bike or maybe an electric scooter. We want to point out that the city has, and you'll see in this diagram, multiple parking assets. We have, I believe in the city, a lot more parking than we realize, but we don't have connectivity between our parking assets. The Hillman Garage rebuild and the City Dock reimagined gives us an opportunity to identify those parking assets and connect those parking assets. And what I believe will be a zero emissions in terms of the vehicles. Now, we can't talk about the power source. That's something that we have to work on. But if we can get people, when they're coming to work, some of the 500 employees in the city, or some of the 2 million tourists, if we can get them out of their cars and into some of these parking assets and onto this free transportation, and not do that last quarter of a mile when they come into the city, stop that vehicle getting downtown or onto the peninsula and Eastport, we will have much better environmental outcomes. This ferry is made in Sweden, but it will be assembled in Newport in the same boatyards that are assembling Beneteau boats that are also commercially used for commercial practices in the country. So we know that the Jones Act is one of the things that we have to make sure that we accommodate. It will be a free ferry. It will not be a water taxi, and it will be it will give some people a chance that maybe can't afford the water taxi to get on the water for maybe the first time in their life. It will give the city, I believe, a good ecotourism idea, and will give us all a chance to see how electric boats work and what that experience is like. We think that Watermark could be a good partner in operations of this. We still have to work out a lot of details on that. We know the Annapolis Seamanship School is there. That is another option for us in terms of skippering the boats and logging hours for skippers that are training. But again, this is an idea. It is a work in progress. I'll be proud if Annapolis is a leader in the country on trying new technology. We think Annapolis has always been a leader. I'm looking for the support of this board. I'm here to answer questions, and I appreciate you giving me some time to make the pitch.
Thank you, Mayor Buckley. And as I typically do when we have a presentation or guest, I just go around the our members first before I ask any questions or offer any thoughts. So I will simply start with Frida. And again, this is because we're on Zoom. I happen to have a screen with a pecking order, and Frida, you are the first in the pecking order, and not to say that you have to ask everything. You'll get a second opportunity when we go around everybody.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you very much. And Mayor, thank you for your presentation. It was nice to see the graphics and get an idea of the layout that you're looking for. I don't believe I have any questions at this time, but thank you.
Next up is Peter Trogdon.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. That's really interesting. Where's the money going to come from to pay for it?
Yep. So I made the promise that we wouldn't, for the ferry, for the 300,000 roughly, I'm going to outsource that. Before I even pitched the idea, I took Chris Trombauer, the county's financial lead, on the boat. I took Senator Sarah Elfreth. I have obviously taken this to our federal partners and talked about this, and the cities. That's why we called it the 100% electric plan. And like I said, I believe that the people that have a plan will get the funding. I know there are going to be a lot of transportation dollars out there. My favorite mayor in America, Mayor Buttigieg, is in charge of transportation. He understands that mayors are, I believe, on the forefront of new ideas around the country. That we understand our population. We are not removed from the people. We are part of the population. It's a little bit different to state representatives, even county representatives. We run into each other, we meet each other, we talk to one another. And so we have verbal commitments, we believe, from the county for $250,000. I made a pitch to the state for another $250,000 from them. And then we're going to try to draw down as much money as we can from the Build Back Better money that we believe will be on the table. But this is a very eligible project for grant funding. We have put it in our budget, so we have that as as sort of a backup. But like most of my plans, I try to find alternative money sources that that we can not have to go to the local taxpayer. But this is a worthy project. This is we all as politicians have a responsibility to lead the way, to try to leave this city better than the way we found it when we came into office, to bring forward new ideas, to try to reverse climate change, try to be a part of the solution. This is a small piece, but we will have the majority of the funding grant funded.
Yeah, well, my concern, I've owned boats my whole life, and I'm concerned about the cost of ownership and the cost of operating. Can you get grant money that'll continue to flow? Because the money just starts when you buy the boat. It just, it can get a lot more expensive over time. Does the money keep coming if you get grant money?
Yeah, so when we make this part of our transportation plan, 80% of public transport is funded through state funding and other sources and federal funding. So this will be a part of our comprehensive transportation plan if the pilot works. And so that funding will come down from those sources. So currently the shortfall in that is made up through parking revenues. I am making sure that we have, for example, Eastport, if we do the recovery zones and ideas like that, we want to make sure that those businesses pay into a transportation fund. If parking spaces are taken away from existing parking spaces in businesses, I believe myself that they should pay a small amount into a transportation fund, and that transportation fund can be used for operations of these transit ideas. Because and especially I'll speak to Eastport, a lot of you will identify with that. Eastport has I support also parking zones. I think it's time for Eastport to have parking overlays, but nobody in Eastport really has come up with any kind of parking ideas because they haven't had to, and I think we need to think about that, just like we have in the historic district, and we need to start to get some parking assets, some motivation to get some parking assets organized. And I believe we're going to get that done through this. We've done a lot of work in Eastport, especially with the Maritime rezoning, which I'm proud of the work we've done there. I'm excited about the future of the Maritime businesses, but we also have to sort of balance that with the residents as well.
And I think my last question is just recognizing we have such an excellent water taxi company that's been operating for some time and doing an excellent job. I'm just concerned about, the city stepping in, and when we've got a private company doing that, why should the city step in and step into their business there?
I think, the Watermark have a lease, not a monopoly. We have to recognize that there are other transportation ideas. We have to recognize that in cities like Seattle and cities like Sydney, they have mobilized the waterfront for transportation. I don't think we should close our mind to it just because one business has a water taxi. I appreciate and I recommend all the time the water taxi. We are not proposing that this ferry goes out to boats, goes out to other parts of the city. I understand the fear because if 80% of your business comes from Eastport, but I don't think it's going to take 80% of your business because it's not going to operate. It can only hold so many people. It's going to run at different times. It's one vessel. I don't see it as the threat, but I have to acknowledge that, but I think that, we have to be thinking about and the future. And I believe that the transportation on the water is part of our future.
Thank you.
Debbie, you are next.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Mayor. I think that the electric mobility plan is a good one. And I know that I'm not associated with Watermark anymore, but we did come to you a year ago and tell you that Watermark's intention was to provide electric water taxis because we thought it would be a really cool and good thing for the city. So I think that the concept is good, and I appreciate that you recognize the service that has been offered with water taxi. My question, a couple of questions, and an observation from my knowledge of the business and knowledge of transportation. The water taxi service has been part of the transportation system since its inception in the mid-'80s. And it seems to me that it would make economical sense for the city to contract with that operator to provide this service. You're correct. Close to 80% of the water taxi business is across the creek, just from City Dock to Eastport. And are you committed to this service, even if it does go into direct competition with a local maritime business? There is a risk, a real risk of losing the taxi service that goes out to the moored boats and goes up to Spa Creek if 80% of the water taxi business is taken away from a free service that is taxpayer funded. And I appreciate what you say that Watermark doesn't have a monopoly, but there are different levels of playing field. and using grants to compete with the private sector and, at some level, taxpayer dollars to compete with the private sector is not the same as another private business coming in to compete. So those are my observations and questions.
I think, Debbie, the first conversation we had was with Jake and with you and the potential to be the operators and how we can, potentially partner on it. I think, lots of things are on the table here. We love the water taxi. It's a big part of our identity. We want it to stay. If there, you felt massive adverse effects, in the pilot, well, we can revisit that. I don't think a single vessel doing a dedicated route is the same thing as a water taxi. I think it is one specific journey going at one specific time. We're not even sure on the hours it operates, but I can tell you I will make sure that it operates through the winter, so it won't cherry pick the times. It will operate for people to get across through the colder months in the city, and that will be a good thing in terms of mobility for the city. So we are going to try something new, and there's lots of moving pieces here. We want it. There are other types of mobility on land that we have as well. And we have to be open to that on the water.
Thank you for your response. I still think that for the city, the most economic way to do this is to utilize the service that has been part of the transportation service for some time. But that I'll leave that at this point for the next person.
Thank you.
Next on the camera, at least, is Mike Tomasini.
How is everybody? Thank you. Thanks, Gavin, for the presentation. I'm a huge believer in what you're trying to do from a mobility standpoint. I am also I'm a huge believer in a sustainable future for the city of Annapolis because of these two knuckleheads next to me. My concerns are a little bit different as an operator of a U.S. Coast Guard certified vessel. It's not an easy process to have a boat constructed and then certified by the Coast Guard to carry passengers from one place to another. I mean, it's not an easy process, and it is not something that's generally done with boats that are constructed, designed, or manufactured in any way overseas. It's the requirements for the Coast Guard to carry any more than 6 passengers require your vessel to be inspected, and as it's built, it's laid up. It's very difficult to even get a stateside vessel that was built here in the States where the plans are readily available to be hull core sampled and all of the other things and have it approved to carry passengers for hire. It's a difficult process, and from my end of it, I think if we're spending $300,000 on a boat, I'm going to guess that ticket number is going to go way up when the Coast Guard gets involved in the hoops that they want to put somebody through. For one, just looking at the picture, and that picture is just a concept, I'm guessing, but an open deck floor plan like that is not going to float. That's not right now, my boat, rails have to be 36 inches high, and they have to be able to withstand 200 pounds of force at any one location on the boat. And capacity is generally derived from either your open rail space, which is where customers can stand comfortably, or by seating capacity. And then in addition to that, there's a stability component that requires that the boat is stable enough to carry enough people and that if they all ended up on one side of the boat, it wouldn't tip over. So without having the details from the manufacturer on how they plan to accomplish that, I think that there's still a lot of work to be done on who provides it and where we get it, and whether or not we can even use it once we have it in our hands. It's for me, it's more a nuts and bolts kind of thing than anything. I believe that, you know, esport is the real draw. I'm anticipating more people getting on the boat downtown and coming into esport. But my concern is that we might end up with something that we can't use. And for me, I think that's where I would want to see some real pen on paper answers on how that's accomplished.
Yeah, I'm with you, Mike. I mean, if it doesn't meet the criteria, then it's a no-go, right? So we're not going to make the acquisition until all the boxes are checked. But you know, we do have many vessels, such as Benetto's boats that carry people. This vessel won't be charging people, and the technologies are far more advanced overseas than they are in America yet. So we're for this type of boat, I believe, you know, there is not an equivalency of it in the country yet, and so, you know, we're going to make our case for that, and we're also going to make our case that we are trying to lure this company to the region to do manufacturing here. They are looking for a home in the US, and they're looking at Newport at the moment, but you know, the county executive and I really want to attract them and to either county or Baltimore or Annapolis to do their manufacturing in the Chesapeake Bay, because we think, you know, these and when you ride one, you'll see, you know, we really believe these boats are the future, and they have a very promising future. They perform amazingly well. And we're excited to make it part of our identity and show that, you know, that this is our priorities in the city of Annapolis, and that is, you know, green technologies and you know, that whatever you call it, that kind of construction.
Mike, anything else? You're on mute. I said, anything?
I'm good. I may circle back, but I'm good for now.
So
All right,
blue tech was the word I was looking for. Sorry.
All right, Duncan, I think you're next on the agenda, or next on the list.
Thanks. Hey, Mr. Mayor.
Hey there, how you doing?
I think you're to be complimented on your vision. No doubt about that whatsoever. And it is the way we're going in the future. My comments, I'm representing Port Annapolis Marina here, and the heavier marine trades down the peninsula towards Chesapeake Harbor. My life has been an endless stream of broken stuff. And so my question to you has to do more with support of this vessel and keeping it moving. It's a brand new technology. In some ways, it's a simpler technology. And in some ways, it's going to be more difficult because we don't have any particular maintenance base, support base, or parts supply. Have you thought about this, and how would you address that?
Yeah, I think you make a great point, Duncan. It is a new technology, but it's very, what I believe, and I'm no expert, much simpler technology than the multiple parts that we all deal with in fossil fuel based engines. You know, so I you know, my very simplistic view of it is that there are less moving parts, there are less things to break, and that and if I can use electric cars as an example, there is less servicing, and that is the selling piece. Whenever we are talking about, you know, moving our fleet to electric, one of the big selling points of that is less maintenance, less expense in operations in terms of fueling and stuff like that. So I would hope the same holds true for this blue technology.
One follow-up question, and I'll let you go on. Have you given any consideration on where this company could land, where they could set up shop here in Annapolis?
So, of course, my dream would be the David Taylor Center, and a triangulation between Back Creek, City Dock, and David Taylor, as I'm sure something that Ross and I dream about. We see so much potential there, and especially if it was tech based. This is a new technology, and I think it'd be a perfect fit. Now, Maurice might have different ideas because he's got some level of approvals, and I'm sure he's reluctant to move from those ideas. But I think, knowing that he had, if the county executive has his back on the zoning and the approvals, I think, we could expand, or we could give a density bonus to put some kind of operation like this in place. I know that there's very limited space, but I will be happy with anywhere. But if I look around our creeks and waters, I can't think of anywhere where there's any room. And so it would almost have to be further towards Baltimore, where there's a lot of space, or somewhere else in the county where there's some room, But of course, my dream would be there, and then a connecting transportation option from that to the city and to Back Creek.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for that. No more questions from my side.
All right, Scott, you're next, I believe, and I'm looking down the list. I think probably then it defaults to me.
I think Jake is there too, if you need.
I'm looking to see where Jake.
Jake's over there somewhere.
He's floating around here somewhere. Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for attending the meeting tonight. And I am a positive thinker on electric everything, cars, boats, whatever it may be. So I think that's a good idea in the long haul across a number of avenues, so to speak. And the boat idea could be one. My concern with the boat project is that the city would have to buy or build a boat from scratch to just test this concept, when you have a fleet of boats, the water taxis, which you could take one boat at very little expense and dedicate a couple of things. One is to try the concept, even if it's a fueled engine, to see the concept of where you park it, where you dock it, and that idea, which I personally think might be a good idea. But I think it ought to be tested rather than starting a boat building company virtually and going in, head first, feet first, everything else into a business to operate, and you haven't even tried the concept yet. And for those in the finance departments, I know a little bit about it. And I think Duncan and Mike were saying, if your $300,000 bottom line ticket is going to be a lot more than that because of all the other requirements, that's just to get it in the water. And to test the concept, you've got the goods right here to test the concept with it. And if you want to get an electric motor, you could convert one of Watermark's boats to an electric motor and have an electric motored boat and try it for a year or two before you want to get a dedicated boat, which nobody knows if it's the proper type boat. I can tell you that there's enough people on this board that hop on the boat and could probably test it in 15 minutes. And, Mike's comments were very apt on that. A lot of us know boats, and balances of boats and things. We could probably engineer the boat on an amateur basis, but to buy the boat somewhere else, if it started in Europe, and start a boat company, I think is, starting the cart before the horse here. I would get, from a planning standpoint, test the project with an existing boat, whether it's Watermarks or not. Watermarks happen to be ready to go, and then even convert one to electricity and see if the concept works with existing boats that do the trial work, rather than just getting into the boat business and getting all the other things involved in building boats with it. And then the second or third thing that was on my mind is, does the city really want to get into the boating business per se, when you've got so many good companies around Watermark being one, but I mean companies of builders and experts that know how to work on hulls and bottoms, and people like Mike Tomasini, as well as Watermark, who are experts at managing and running things. And the city would be starting from scratch, pure scratch, and doing that with qualified captains and staff and maintenance and everything else. So I see the project fraught with unknowns if the city really wants to get into the boating business, which there are so many good boating businesses in town that can repair these boats and do all the things, much less build them. And I think the project and the idea is good, but my concern is how you go about starting it. You want to throw $300,000 to $500,000 at the wall just to see if that particular boat works. I'd test the concept first with the assets that are in town, with the expertise of the people in town, and maybe even drop an electric motor in one of the boats in town here, if it's a Watermark boat or what. They're proven boats, proven people, management's there. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Thank you, Scott.
I
Go
think-
ahead, Mayor.
Yeah, and I think you're all valid points, Scott. We are in the boat business. We have an excellent harbour master fleet that is well maintained or well managed. We are sharing the responsibility with the county and the state. We're not suggesting that we start a boat building company. We're saying that we're trying to lure the company to do production here. All we're saying is if we can get a pilot boat funded by the county and the state and the city and federally, that we want to try something new, right? If I knew of a product of the same quality that was so far ahead of the technology here that's built in America, we would take a look at that. I haven't seen that yet. You guys are in the business a lot, so you might know that. I've definitely seen multiple outboard engines. This boat has a very long battery life that can last a whole day without charging. That is one of the challenges even on land when you talk about converting public transport to electric. The battery lives are the challenge, and you have to have 2 vehicles to do the job because they cover too much ground. So the battery life of this boat will be able to run a full day without having to be recharged, and then it can go back to the Burtis House or to the Long Dock at Prince George Street, and then ultimately to the infrastructure we put in place at 5th Street. But it is a pilot. It's an idea, and I think these are good candidates for a harbour master boat as well. They're very similar to the boats that we put on. I do really favour the transom the way it is. You can put railings up there when you need to. There is the ability to put guards up there once the boat is underway. But that open transom, I think, would be a great thing for our harbour master to drop moorings and do different services that way. But like I said, it's a new idea. I'm throwing things out here. Obviously, know that I haven't got like the biggest fan club here, but I'm appreciate you guys giving me a chance to talk to you and present the idea. I think you'll all be able to laugh at me if I get it wrong, and you'll be able to say it's Buckley's new bike lane. But I will tell you, I'm not planning, and I will. While we're on the bike lane, I'm going to say that every single dollar and every single bit of material on the bike lane has been repurposed multiple times throughout the city, and so that expense has been spread out over 4 years, and it made a statement about who we are as a city and what our priorities are. And that's on that idea. This is a priority for me, the electrification of our transportation, and then ultimately the long-term electrification of transportation that leaves the city and goes into jurisdictionally but the technology is not there yet for the buses, and the funding sources are not there yet. We believe we have a funding source for this. We believe we have a good product to pilot it. We have a very receptive city to new ideas, and I'm giving it a go.
So Mayor, just on that, I understand what you're saying. You could start this project. You can start the ferry tomorrow because you've got the boats in town, the captains in town to do it. Why not start it right away and then work into the electrification of it and the whole forms of it? But try the project and see if the city likes it. I mean, I think it's a good idea to have something similar, but you could start it tomorrow. You're talking about starting soon, but you won't start it probably for a year if you go through the private boat building process. So maybe it's worth doing both.
Can I just say one of the attractions to that boat, Scott, is that you can roll on and roll off, right? And you can roll 4 bikes and 4 people into the back of that boat, or you can hand over 4 bikes and load them onto the roof, the top of the roof. Now we need to do a ladder and some other modifications, but the attraction is, and what we think it will be, like the first kind of mobility plan that is not a ferry, that is about boats, bikes as well as people. I know on bigger ferries you can, of course, and I know on big car ferries you can, of course, but it will be a little bit more awkward on a water taxi with the current designs.
Not too much. You can give it a try just to get things started, get a head start.
Frida, we'll come back to you then, and I'll conclude whenever everyone else is finished. But Frida, what did you want to add?
Thank you. Just have a quick question for the mayor. Were any discussions ever held with Eastport 32, locally designed, and it's a local boat? And I've seen a wheelchair brought onto the drop transom on the Eastport 32 before. To me, it seems logical if you're going to go, with an American-made boat, you got one in your own backyard right now. Thank you.
Is that electric?
Certainly can be modified.
Yeah, certainly could be modified. It's not electric yet, but it could be modified.
I'll definitely take a look at that. Yeah.
All right. Let me, I'm not going to try to repeat a lot of the cogent comments and questions that were put out, but let me just throw out 2 or 3 things, Mr. Mayor. One is I totally support the concept of the electric mobility. Anything we can do to reduce the carbon footprint, whether it's our own individual carbon footprint, the city's carbon footprint, the county's, the state, the federal, whatever, is all going to inure to the benefit, as Mike said, of those knuckleheads that are sitting next to him. I have a 26-year-old knucklehead and in the Merchant Marine, and it's amazing the amount of carbon sensitivity that even the Merchant Marine, at least the U.S. Merchant Marine, has these days. So I think as a broad concept, I certainly endorse the electric mobility. I think a lot of my colleagues on the board have made very cogent comments at the practical level, which will lead me to come back in a moment. It's interesting you mentioned David Taylor. I was on the David Taylor Reuse Committee in 2000, when David Taylor was handed off to Maurice Jose and Annapolis Partners. And I was there because I happened to be, unfortunately, chair back then of this committee. We advocated and advocated and advocated for a maritime use component at David Taylor, and were rebuffed along every step of the way. If you notice, there was no provision in there for a boat building, not even in the zoning. They'd have to modify the zoning. We have tried through a couple of other county executives to get them to get Maurice Jose off dead center to do some development over there. It is a 40-some acre piece of property that sits fallow at the moment, with deep draft, 20-foot draft slips, and a great opportunity. And to the extent that you can encourage this county executive, this state government, anybody to move off dead center on David Taylor, I would support that 100%. It is a prime piece of maritime real estate that is sitting there going fallow for lack of development, and they got it for $1. So, or $10. I don't remember what the consideration was, but it was pretty. It was a sweet deal. So that's my 2 cents worth on David Taylor. Another hat is I'm an Eastport resident. I do have the same concerns that have been expressed by the Eastport Civic Association, and I'm not going to go into them, but they basically surround the parking and the influx that a free taxi or not free ferry might bring into Eastport and impact our little piece of Annapolis. I recognize that there's obviously Eastport is a part and parcel of the bigger Annapolis community, and solutions have to include or should include Eastport. With respect to the circulator, I was troubled to hear that the only current proposal would be to run the circulator from the Eastport Shopping Center to 5th Street. There are businesses elsewhere in Eastport that would benefit from a circulator. So I would encourage, in terms of the land circulator, that some consideration be given to the circulator making a circulation as opposed to a direct line, point A to point B. And I also wonder if, as the Eastport Shopping Center develops, my office is across the street, just how much shopping center parking would be available. But certainly it's probably more than certainly any additional parking in Eastport would help. But turning back to the electric mobility, and in particular the boats, what I have sort of sat back and had the benefit of listening to everyone else is that really timing seems to be sort of at the forefront, coupled with the fact that we have the ability to exercise that timing quickly in a partnership with existing businesses. As Debbie pointed out, and she and I have talked in the past, they are moving towards some electrification. And it seems to me that the real difference between a current water taxi configuration and the current and the boat, and I think it was Swedish if I remember correctly, is sort of the ability to roll on and roll off, in particular bicycles and people. And I think Scott and Mike were probably dead on that. Yes, you can probably go through a couple of years of Coast Guard approvals and all the tests and everything, and probably come up with a design that would beat Coast Guard approval that could accommodate bicycles. But I wonder whether or not working with Jake, and Jake in particular is now Watermark, that we couldn't accomplish at least a test vessel in a much shorter time frame at a lot less expense. That's one point. The other point, or another point, is you mentioned Prince George Street as the other end of the ferry. Well, the bottom end of Prince George Street is a dinghy landing. That if you remove that dinghy landing, and if you look at it, it's a busy dinghy landing. Those are dinghies that are come ashore with people who are visiting by boat, and you're going to remove that dinghy landing away, and the only other dinghy landing in downtown Annapolis puts everybody in the city dock, which is overcrowded. We try to keep the dinghies. It'd be nice to try to keep more of the dinghies down on Prince George Street. So I think, again, there is a practical question about whether or not the ferry going to that particular point is one that is going to be able to be worked out. And if so, is it going to be at the expense of another segment of the boating community? I like to use the analogy of whack-a-mole, because you attempt to solve a problem, and a laudable problem, and then there's another mole that pops up its head that you got to whack. And I just think at this point that the timing, more than anything else, is a little too short, and we need to look at all of these things that this board has brought up, and the Eastport Civic Association has brought up. And the last comment I'll make is, and I kind of leave it to Beth, although it wasn't on her watch. The city has tried electric boats in the past. There were, what I think, Beth, you can correct me, but I believe it was one or two of the pump out boats were attempted to be electric, and they have been shelved because of what I think it was maybe Scott or Duncan mentioned, is the lack of ability to be able to find competent people to maintain those boats in the local area. And, you know, sometimes build it and they will come. And so you have an electric mobility project, and then that will draw in people to help maintain that project. But I do think that there's perhaps the city should discuss in some detail with the harbor master or whoever may have been involved in those other electric boat initiatives in the city a few years ago. And I do recognize that technology has changed, and probably thanks in no small part to Elon Musk and some of the things he's done. But again, it really comes to me, it comes back down to timing and being able to answer a lot of these questions and not just dive in for $300,000, which is just getting your feet wet if you can keep it at $300,000, because of the longer term costs are going to be, they're not going to be small, and there's not going to be fraught with problems that probably should be thought out ahead of time. But I do thank you for the opportunity to present this. I am open-minded about it and I'm glad to hear it's a pilot program. And I look forward to seeing how we can make it work and with addressing the concerns that have been expressed here. I think the overall electric mobility concept is laudable, and frankly, you mentioned the bike lanes, and I am not a bike rider, and some of us have chuckled at that, but I compliment you on the innovative ideas. I will tell one little aside. Back when you were running for the first term, you mentioned a Ferris wheel. Not long thereafter, I happened to be on a coastal town in France, a port not unlike Annapolis, and there was a Ferris wheel. And I took pictures and I sent it back to a number of my friends because you had just made the comment. So it was not as far-fetched as many people put it out there to be at the time.
I was just going to lease one. I wasn't going to build one, honestly.
And we don't have anybody that has one right now in town that you can partnership with. All right, I'll go back around real quickly, and Frida, for some reason you moved. Peter, any follow up with the mayor? Okay, Debbie, you're next.
Thank you. Just really quickly, Duncan had brought up the fact that things break, and that's correct. And one of the things that and again, I'm still using the we for Watermark, but the fleet of Watermark's water taxis is 4 boats. And with the right design that Jake has been working on, there will be 4 of them. A 1-boat fleet is always a challenge because things do break down. And again, using an existing business that can provide that redundancy to make sure that there is reliable service is going to be a good thing for the city. So I just offer that as another reason to work with a local maritime business. And thank you. I agree with the concept. I think it's wonderful, and it's something that is needed. So thanks.
Mike?
Go ahead. He said, I'm good. I'm just corralling the knuckleheads.
Okay. Duncan?
I'm good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the time you spent with us. I sure appreciate it.
Scott?
Yes, behind the electrification concept, Mr. Mayor, and I just think there's ways to do it properly to save the city some trouble, and I think I'd vote for a Ferris wheel too.
Frida? Frida, there you go.
No, all good. I have a fairly new hybrid vehicle, and I rarely buy gas. It's wonderful. So I'm fully supportive of the concept. Thank you.
Last but not least, Jake, I didn't pass you over on purpose. I But as a non-board member, but a guest, if you've got any additional comments or we're certainly welcome as a member of the public at large.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mayor, thanks for being here. Advisory board, thanks for letting me speak. I am, like I said last night at City Council, I'm in support of the mobility plan. I think it's a great thing. Battery power, as you said during the Super Bowl, almost every commercial was about some sort of battery power. We're definitely heading in that direction. Interestingly enough, right now as we speak, we have 2 battery powered engines on the back of one of our water taxis, Lily, and 4 rather large batteries connected to them this past weekend, and later on in the week last week, we've been riding around Back Creek fully battery powered. It's neat. It's quiet. You don't have the vibration. All you hear is the water slapping against the hull. You can speak to people. It's really neat. I'm happy to take you for a ride. I'm happy to partner and help you along the way with the concept that you would like. We're putting in the work before we come up with a design. We want to know how much battery we need for the long days. We can run 15 to 16 hours during boat show, or maybe even more. The infrastructure, the fast charging infrastructure, we're putting in the work to understand what we need to be successful. We've worked with a naval architect. We've built a hull. We have designed a hull. We have designed a hull. We're working with a battery power propulsion engineer, and we've come a long way in the past year since we spoke to you and the city manager. I think it's a wonderful thing. I am in full support. It's the way of the future, and I do find it interesting, and we're happy to work with you on this too. Projected ridership in the winter. We have found that there aren't many people looking for a boat ride or to cross the harbor in the winter. You mentioned you would run at different times than the current water taxi, which really is the winter or in the middle of the night. So I'm interested to hear more about that. Also, there's in one of your presentations, there was a backup for the electric bus. The backup for the electric bus was the existing fleet, understood. What would be the backup for the electric ferry? Is that, I'd imagine that's the water taxi that we have now. And I believe that's it. Thank you.
Well, I'd love to comment on that, Jake. I'll definitely take you up on that ride. I've learned a lot from this, and there's definitely great ideas that we could do, and maybe that is the route we go. I'm excited about talking it through with you, and I see definitely a potential partnership. You asked a question though. What were the 3 questions? There was something else that you said that I wanted to speak to. What the 4 things that you said there?
The different times that the water taxi would
run.
So in the winter.
I'd like to talk about that really quickly. We see City Dock as an opportunity to get some winter programming. I've taken a couple of the councillors, not Ross yet, to some water, some ice skating concepts around the region. We think that we could have one of the most romantic ice rinks in the country, an ice ring that is next to the US Naval Academy, one of the most iconic colleges in the country. What would be more romantic than midshipmen ice skating on an ice ring? What would be better than the view of an ice ring from Eastport with kind of very European looking lights? We think that that during the winter, City Dock is desolate. During the week there are not things to do there. We see the potential for maybe an ice ring after the boat show, and that continues all the way through to March. And then I love what Watermark do with, and I've said it to Debbie a number of times, the little Christmas boat with antlers, and how cute is that when you come into a city and you see that little option for you during the holiday season. So we think there's going to be the potential for a lot of winter programming in there, which will mean that people will want to get to and from different places in the city while they're enjoying City Dock. So we think the future is there for some winter transportation. And even if it was just rain on the weekends, and understanding that the costs of it are covered through transportation, which has, it generally doesn't make money in the country. We could cover that cost through, whereas, it's harder in the private sector. There's an expectation on government to provide transportation throughout the year. So it'd just be an extension of that idea. But I'm glad you brought that up, Jake, and I'm looking forward to having a ride on your electric.
Yeah, absolutely. And if the demand was there, we'd be happy to run a water taxi during the winter. We just found that it has not been in the past. We did run the water taxi in the winter while the Spa Creek Bridge was being redone for that winter.
All right. I think we've taken up enough of the mayor's time. He graciously has come in, and again, it was a great presentation and really helped us understand what the concept is, and also I hope helps you understand some of the perspectives that we kind of can bring to the project. Also, one other thing, and it's a little bit of a I'm going to put Jake on the spot. I usually put Debbie on the spot, but I knew what her answer would be. We have a new council, and fortunately we do not have a new mayor, but we do have a new council, and some of whom may never have been on the water before. And one of the things we have done as a board in almost every 4 years, for far back as I can remember, is we offer the council and department heads and maybe one other person from the department an opportunity to get out on the water and just take a tour of primarily Spa Creek and Back Creek, a little bit of narration on a spring afternoon, and we will probably be making that offer. I have to talk to Jake about making a boat available, et cetera, but I would ask that you encourage your staff and the council. Ross has been out several times, but to join us when that invitation comes out, because I think it's enlightening for the department heads, particularly some of the department heads that deal directly with issues on the water, as well as new council members, to see what this city looks like from the water. It is truly, as you know, a very different perspective looking at the city from the water. And we think that council members in particular get a lot of helpful information to see what it looks like from the water when we take up these kinds of issues.
It would be our pleasure.
Thank you, Jake. All right, Mr. Mayor, anything else? Because otherwise we will certainly let you go, and appreciate the opportunity. Hillary, thank you too for doing all your slide work.
No problem.
All right, thank you, everybody. I'm going to this is my last meeting for the day. Truly appreciate what you guys are doing. Thank you for keeping an open mind, and I'm looking forward to the next conversation we all have. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, with that, we will see if we can roll through the rest of the agenda. Since, gee, I have lots of time left because it's only 6:10, but for the rest of you, it's not that. Ross, I assume that you would have chimed in if you had wanted to do so. I didn't call on you because you hadn't raised your hand, but hopefully you don't take that as a slight.
No, I appreciated hearing the comments from the advisory board. I have committed to the mayor to support all of the mobility plan. I think that a lot of the issues you've brought up are going to get sorted out in the budget competition. There's going to be a lot of other things competing for that money, but he got elected for his ideas, and I think that's why he got reelected as well.
Oh, and it was interesting that he was the first to mention the bike lanes, and that it's just an idea. You know, it's it didn't work out, but you don't know until you try. All right, let's go to the regular, everybody has a copy of the minutes from the January meeting. Is there a motion to adopt the minutes? Debbie's motion, second. Duncan, second. All in favor? Kimberly, unanimous. First item on the agenda was 04041. Obviously, we have finished with that. The second one I can run through pretty quickly. I sent everybody a spreadsheet, alphabetical, with the schedule for attending either virtually or in person, depending on the meeting. The county's Maritime Industry Advisory Board. If you cannot attend on a particular date that your name is on the list, or because you're out of town and it's not going to be virtual, if you could arrange separately without involving me, unless you're going to swap with me, somebody to swap with for that meeting or to cover that meeting, I'd appreciate it. There's enough cats to herd without hurting this one. Also, it's only one night a month. I think Scott, isn't it like you're the first one. It's the fourth Monday, and they are like at 5 o'clock, so they're like 5 to 6:30 or something like that. They're not real intrusive. So if you would do that, Stephen, we'll move to the economic development report or update. What do you have for us? Stephen, there you go.
Yep, found it. Thank you. I'll be quick. The short story is that things are looking pretty good or pretty well. So far this year, we've had 14 new, expanded, or relocated businesses. Our combined commercial vacancy rate is 4.8%, which is actually down. We had one ribbon cutting in January that was Kogan Dojo, located at 1912 Forest Drive. Economic development has been busy with hosting or co-hosting workshops. We did a webinar Wednesday series with Anne Arundel Economic Development and the State Department of Labor. These were workshops for small businesses in Anne Arundel County. We have also supported the launch of the Inclusive Ventures program with Anne Arundel Economic Development. This is a program for small, women-owned, minority-owned, and veteran-owned businesses. And this program provides education, mentoring, and access to capital. And this is the third cohort. And the last bit of news, our economic development team provided assistance to 51 businesses and I'll say partners last month.
You have been busy, to say the least.
January was very busy.
And it sounds like, and it's going to it may get busier with the proposal to essentially eliminate restaurant parking requirements.
Maybe a bit.
I assume everyone has seen that legislation. Fortunately, that does not come to the Maritime Advisory Board. It comes to Mr. Alderman Arnett, but it does not come to the Maritime Advisory Board. The comprehensive plan, anything, Duncan?
Same old thing, man, it's crickets.
Okay, Ross, am I correct? I'm reading this now as being a comprehensive plan for 2040. It's a 20-year plan.
I think it changed a while ago.
You know,
So-
I've actually been in touch with these guys, and multiple times I've been told I will be contacted when it's time.
Okay. I just happened to notice that. I mean, I knew it's always been a 10-year plan, but now they're calling it 2040. So maybe the state has relaxed their requirements that we don't have to do 10-year, we do 20-year. I hadn't. It just caught my eye. That's all.
Well, if this keeps up, I'll be dead, and then I won't have to do it.
Or you'll be chair and you're going to be tasked.
Oh no! Oh no! Oh no!
let's see, NDZ application, I take it there's nothing changed, Debbie, I haven't heard
Right.
anything.
Yeah,
Okay.
no update. Mm-mm.
I haven't heard anything more from Berta's house. Beth, you may know if there's anything movement, but I think Ashley would have told me if anything had happened.
I'll give you a quick update. DNR had some additional concerns about their right of way. So that has delayed settlement, and now we don't have a settlement. I mean, we never had a settlement date, but now the attorneys are sort of volleying back and forth. There's no real contention. But the sad part is, you know, all of the spring bookings will be missed because we don't have any settlement date, and I can't entertain any conversation about any boats coming. And I guess Frida knows, you know, certainly that the Maiden wants to come, and you know, we have other vessels that want to come, and we can't have a conversation about it because we don't have a settlement date. So we're sort of stuck, and you know, I don't think there's anything that Ashley can do to move it along because the attorneys have it in their office right now.
Shakespeare may have been right about killing all the lawyers. But here's a question, and you didn't mention it, and maybe it doesn't come into play. But if we're going to run a ferry to the end of Prince George Street, where is that going to impinge on this easement or whatever that the Department of Natural Resources now wants or is getting for that stretch of the water there?
I haven't heard precisely where the mayor would take that ferry out of. So if I'm imagining what he might want, it would be from the port side, the Navy side of the long pier. So I'm not sure that would impede anything.
So you think it would go out of the pier and it would go out of the pier and not out of the end of Prince George Street, the street end where the dinghy dock is?
I mean, I don't know if that's his vision. That wouldn't be my vision.
Right, but that open transom vessel, the idea would be to back it up there and people roll their bicycles on.
I mean, but you could roll your bicycles onto the long dock, but you wouldn't want to do away with the dinghy dock there. That dinghy dock's super important to our big boats. But if the mayor has a different vision, I haven't heard that.
Well, that's why I raised that about that dinghy dock and whether or not it was going to take away that dinghy dock, because when he talked about, Fifth Street to Prince George Street, that was the first time I heard that location. The first thing that came to mind is that dinghy dock's down there.
I mean, honestly, if it was up to me, I would change the right of way for DNR police and I would move that Boston whaler back.
I'd take those pilings out and do away with DNR. But
I mean, the dock that touches the Naval Academy, I would move that Boston whaler back and I would run this ferry. If I thought that was going to work well, I would run that out of the end of that dock. Okay. And those passengers would go down that because there's great parking there and it wouldn't impede any other commercial, recreational, or transient vessel traffic there.
Well,
that would be my view.
Keep in mind, I mean, I just would ask you to, stay in the loop with them when when they start talking about the practicality of this, where they're going to run this from, because I think there's a whole bunch of practicalities with that whole area there. I use the whack-a-mole analogy, but if you put it on the long dock, now you're taking up the long dock. But if you put it at the Naval Academy, now you're infringing on the DNR. If you put it at the end of Prince George Street, now you're taking away the dinghy docks. So I think
I think it'll be really frustrating to me personally, although it's not about me, to not use the space as well as we can use it. But just with a little bit of dialogue, I think we can use that space. I'm excited about the new space, and I think we can use it to the benefit of a lot of people. So I'm hoping that we can all work together, to make that work great.
And just to comment on that, I understand, Beth, what you're saying. The floating dock, I think, has an attraction too, from practicality, is that it stays the height closer to the height of the boat, so people aren't having to climb up on a pier, which might be, depending on the tide, 3 or 4 feet up. And having a floating dock, I think, is safer either way. If that floating dock or another little floating dock could be put there, I think that's a nice way to have it if the ferry is going to come in there.
I mean, sure, but ideally, all of that would be floating docks in there.
Yeah.
We have 5 different concepts to put all new floating docks in there.
Yeah.
I mean, we need to do more floating docks in Annapolis.
Yeah, they're good.
It's way overdue, in my view.
Yeah, and you certainly don't want to take away the dinghy access there, as you say.
I hope not.
All right, let's see, 0222 mooring permits. Ross and I are going to speak towards the end of the week, I hope, at some point, and go over some of the a number of the comments that were brought up over the last 3 weeks. Ross, I sent you a note too that Beth and Ashley and I were going to try to talk. And it turns out that's probably going to be after you and I talk, which is probably good. And see if we can't hammer out some language that accommodates Beth's concerns about enforcement, while at the same time accommodating Alderman Finlayson's concerns expressed at the committee meeting the other day, which I sat in on remotely. In which she expressed, and as did others, Alderman Savage and you expressed concerns about, again, if we do this, we create a problem here, et cetera, and see if we can't come up with language that can accommodate Beth's concerns about enforcement, and the rest of the concerns about fairness to the current slip holders who. Since the issue seems to be, I think, Beth, you said it was 4 or 5 or 3 or 4 abusers of the moorings, as opposed to the other 40 or 50 who did not abuse the privilege, and see if we can't come up with something that works for that. So that's kind of where that one stands.
Yeah, and I really think that Ashley's idea of trying to figure out, I'm certainly probably didn't get it right, but I think Ashley's idea of sitting down, the 4 of us, to try to get it right is good. And in hindsight, I'm thinking we do have 10%. Like if we have 4 people out of 40 people, that's 10% of our annual mooring group that are not, if we want to say that they have to have a demonstrated need, and that's an if, you know, they are not abiding by that. So I'm hoping that our work session will straighten it all out.
I think there's 2 things in that regard. If you could, I know you were looking for it the other day, but if you could point me towards where that phrase or that concept of demonstrated need for a mooring comes into play sometime before we talk next week, that would be helpful. The other thing I do think that it is incumbent upon us to look at or address is Alderman Finlayson's various comments, concerns about are we, with the ability to be able to lease those moorings in the absence of the current leaseholder on a short-term basis. Duncan, the idea would, and maybe you can just tell me very briefly, if I'm a year-round leaseholder at Port Annapolis and I leave to go away for the weekend, Port Annapolis will put a boat in that slip, right?
We will do anything we can to make that money back over on top of yours.
So that is not a new concept in terms of.
No, not at all. Not at all.
So maybe we may have to tap you for ideas about how you make that work as a practical matter when somebody leaves.
You know, I hear exactly what Beth is saying, and I get it. There's a path somewhere.
Well, and I do think that we owe it to Alderman Finlayson and the committee to to address the concerns and point out whether or not the practicality or impracticality of doing some of that with moorings as opposed to slips too. So With
and I
slips-
get that.
With slips, you can move people around a little easier than you can move them on and off a mooring too.
I'm pretty confident we'll figure it out.
All right. I have not had an opportunity to talk to Scott about election of a chair and vice chair, so I'm going to just ask that we defer that. Scott, you and I just need to talk what your thoughts are on, and your thinking is, for the next year moving forward, and we could just do that in a call in the next couple days.
Sure. Okay.
All right.
It's muted.
Is there a motion? Alderman Arnett.
Thank you. Just two quick things. One, I think the committee was sympathetic to the issues that Beth was raising. We're uncomfortable with the legislation the way it is now, but I agree with the harbor master and you. I think we can come up with a solution. I want to give you early warning that you laughed too prematurely on the parking, on the restaurant parking issue, because I think that it is going to have some potentially very grave consequences on maritime in the WME. And I'm quite concerned. I'm meeting with planning staff Friday to start thinking about this, Mike Melanoff and Eric Lashinsky. But I think that we need to be paying attention to what can happen with that legislation. If there's no requirement for parking for a restaurant, then I think there's a potential for a lot more restaurants.
Ross, excuse me, are you speaking about 222 Severn, or are you speaking about downtown?
I'm speaking about Back Creek. I'm other than SAYC, I'm thinking about Eastport Yachting Center, Muller Marine, North Sales, Butler Marine, or the one next to Marcellus, and Horn Point Marina.
Yeah.
Parking requirements were what they could always have had restaurants, 2,000 square foot restaurants. Parking requirements are what kept restaurants out of those marinas, for better or for worse. There is nothing to do that now. And we heard at the maritime legislation, Kyle Alsop say that he would like to turn Muller into a restaurant marina and no longer have the old Bobby Muller operation there. Of course, that's very near and dear to my heart. And also throwing rip sails in the sail box at North Sales is near and dear to my heart. And I worry, and I've had long conversations over the last few days with Franyo about getting maritime businesses getting into the restaurant business, which is notoriously a risky, ephemeral business. And particularly for smaller maritime operations, it could be more than just the tail wagging the dog. So I would be asking you to focus on this pretty quickly, because I think this is going to move along quickly. And I also see that there is a schism starting to grow between the residents of Eastport and the businesses of Eastport in terms of parking pressures, park mobile apps and things like that. There's a very high level of anxiety, and I'm very concerned. So, but I think it will be coming back to you.
If it's referred, we'll deal with it. In the meantime, if it's not referred, we may still deal with it, particularly if you, maybe when we talk about the issues with Beth, you and I can have a side conversation on that and come up with some ideas on the impacts that you're talking about and how we as an MAB can weigh in on that.
Good.
All right. Any other new business that's not on the agenda? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll be entertaining.
You're always entertaining, Duncan. Is anybody seconding Duncan's entertainment?
Second.
Miss Wildy will. All in favor? Thank you all.
Aye.
Thank you all very much. Thanks for all the good cogent comments.